She lived in a small, modest apartment on the top floor of an old building in the heart of the city. The walls were thin, and the creaking of the floors below reminded her that life had its own rhythm, sometimes harsh and unpredictable. Every morning she would wake up before the sun rose, the alarm pulling her out of dreams she never wanted to leave. She had a small kitchen, where the smell of coffee and toasted bread often mixed with the faint scent of paint peeling off the walls. It was simple, but it was hers. Her days were spent in a busy little restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The place was always buzzing with activity, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversations, and the occasional laughter filling the air. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, balancing plates and trays, remembering orders without writing anything down. Her coworkers often admired her speed, though they had no idea of the music that lived in her hands when they weren't around. Music was the one thing that had been constant in her life. As a child, she had spent hours on an old piano in her grandparents' living room, teaching herself songs by ear because lessons were too expensive. The piano was battered, the keys uneven, but every note held a story. She remembered the way her fingers would move over the keys, almost as if they had a mind of their own. The music became her refuge, a place where the worries of the world couldn't reach her. Every tune she learned or created was a secret victory, a small reminder that she could create beauty, even if her daily life felt heavy and ordinary. She often carried a notebook with her, scribbled with melodies and short pieces of music she dreamed of playing on a stage someday. But for now, the notebook stayed in her bag, hidden beneath receipts and order pads. Life didn't leave much room for dreams. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, some unopened, some with urgent stamps that made her chest tighten. But music was still there, a quiet pulse beneath the noise of everyday survival. She had grown used to the routine, yet there were nights when exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. During those moments, she would close her eyes and imagine the sound of the piano, imagining the applause she might one day hear, imagining a life where her talent wasn't just a secret tucked into the corners of her small apartment. Even then, the sound of the restaurant, forks clinking against plates, orders being shouted, customers chatting, never left her completely. It was part of her world, and she had learned to navigate it with both grace and patience. Her coworkers often noticed her humming quietly while she worked, but no one ever guessed the depth of her music. The hums were soft, almost a whisper, enough to keep herself company but not enough to draw attention. Sometimes she would tap her fingers rhythmically on the edge of a table or a tray, creating tiny beats that only she seemed to hear. The rhythm of the restaurant in a way became part of her music, blending with the melodies she carried inside her. Despite the long hours and the demanding pace, she never lost her smile. It was a gentle, natural smile, the kind that could make a tired customer feel a little lighter, a little warmer. She believed that kindness mattered even in the smallest gestures, greeting someone with a genuine smile, asking if they had a good day, or offering a refill without being asked. These small acts of attention were part of her nature, and they didn't cost her anything. Yet behind that smile there was often a quiet longing, a wish that one day her music could reach more than just her own ears. She had moments of doubt, of course. Sometimes, after a particularly long shift, she would slump into a chair in the empty restaurant and wonder if she was wasting her life. The dishes might be clean, the orders fulfilled, and the customers happy, but she would feel a pang of longing for something more. The piano in her apartment seemed like a distant friend, calling to her with notes she could almost hear but couldn't reach at that moment. Still, she never let the doubts linger too long. Music had a way of reminding her that there was a path forward, even if it wasn't clear yet. The city outside was loud and impatient. Cars honked, people hurried by with determined expressions, and the lights of the street reflected off the windows of the restaurant in a dizzying display. Yet inside, there was a rhythm she had learned to dance to, a flow of orders, greetings, and movements that somehow made sense. She thrived in that rhythm, even if it was exhausting, because it allowed her to dream in small fragments, stolen moments between the chaos. Sometimes she would imagine a different life, one where she could walk onto a stage and sit at a piano that wasn't chipped or scratched. She would imagine the hush of a crowd, the way everyone's attention would be solely on her and the music she created. The thought made her heart race and her fingers itch to play. Even though she was hundreds of steps away from that dream at that moment, she held onto that vision tightly, a secret treasure she carried with her every day. Her passion for music wasn't something she shared with many. Friends and coworkers knew her as the hard-working, dependable waitress who never missed a shift, never complained, and always handled the busiest tables with a calm demeanor. They didn't know about the hours she spent practicing scales in her tiny apartment, or the way she would close her eyes and lose herself in melodies that no one would ever hear. It wasn't that she wanted to hide it, but life had taught her that sometimes dreams had to stay private until the world was ready to listen. And so she continued her days, moving through the restaurant with precision and care, balancing trays, refilling drinks, and greeting each customer with warmth. She carried her notebook quietly in her bag, and every night after the last customer had left and the lights were dimmed, she would sit at her small piano and play. The music would fill the room, filling the gaps that the day had left behind, stitching together moments of fatigue and hope into something beautiful. It was her way of surviving, her way of keeping her spirit alive. Even though life was demanding and often unfair, she never let go of the joy that music brought her. It was the one thing that made everything else bearable, the one thing that reminded her of who she truly was beyond the apron and the busy shifts. Every note she played was a statement that she existed, that her talent mattered, and that her dreams were still alive, no matter how long it took for them to be recognized. And in the quiet moments between wiping tables and pouring drinks, she would hum to herself a melody only she could hear, a small rebellion against a life that tried to keep her ordinary. She was ordinary to the world, yes, but extraordinary in her own heart, and that was a secret she carried with her always, a flame of hope in a world that often seemed determined to snuff it out. The restaurant had a certain charm, though it was far from luxurious. Its wooden floors had been scuffed over the years, and the paint on the walls was faded in places, telling stories of countless meals and gatherings. It was a place where people came for comfort food, good conversation, and a warm atmosphere. Most nights she moved through the crowd without drawing much attention, balancing trays and listening carefully to the hum of chatter around her. That night was different. The restaurant had been booked for a private event, a gathering of people who seemed to carry importance in their very presence. The staff had been warned to be particularly attentive, as the clients were known to be critical and exacting. The air felt heavier than usual, filled with anticipation and tension. She had been wiping tables when the manager approached her, eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and panic. The scheduled performer had canceled last minute and the manager was desperate. He looked at her hesitantly, almost unsure if he should ask, and then said, "Could you maybe play for them?" The words fell on her like a sudden weight. She froze for a moment, staring at him in disbelief. She had never performed in front of such an audience. Never in a formal setting, never for strangers who held high expectations. The thought made her stomach twist into knots, and her hands instinctively tightened around the cloth she had been using to wipe the table. But before she could protest, he continued, "I know it's short notice, but we don't have anyone else, please. Just a simple piece, something to fill the time." She shook her head, trying to refuse politely, but the urgency in his voice, the stress in the way he leaned on the counter, made her hesitate. She knew the event couldn't happen without some form of entertainment, and she couldn't bear to see the staff stressed further. She swallowed hard and nodded, almost against her will, feeling her heart pound like a drum in her chest. She followed him to the main room, where the guests were already seated. The space felt larger than it had appeared from behind the counters and tables, and the grand piano at the corner suddenly seemed impossibly huge. She had played on similar pianos before, but this one was different. It gleamed under the lights, polished and intimidating, demanding a certain confidence she didn't feel she had. Her stomach churned and her hands shook slightly as she approached it. The guests were talking in low tones, their eyes occasionally glancing in her direction, curiosity mixed with skepticism. She could feel their judgment before a single note was played. Her knees felt weak, and she had to take a deep breath to steady herself. She imagined stepping back, saying she couldn't do it, but she knew that option had already passed. She had agreed. There was no turning back now. As she sat on the piano bench, the polished wood cold against her skin, she tried to calm herself. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, letting them hover for a moment, feeling the texture, the weight, the potential. The room was quiet, almost expectant. She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the hours she had spent alone in her apartment, the melodies she had created and memorized, the comfort the music had always brought her. Those memories steadied her, reminding her that she had done this before, even if the audience had never been this large or this intimidating. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, breaking the tension like a tiny ripple across a still pond. She played it again more confidently, letting the sound resonate through the room. She focused on the rhythm she had always known in her heart, a pattern that had carried her through countless lonely nights and long days. Slowly, the music began to flow, notes connecting in a gentle, coherent melody. It was simple at first, but there was something in the clarity of the sound that captured attention. She could feel the change in the room. Conversations quieted, and eyes that had been dismissive now watched intently. The subtle shift surprised her, giving her a spark of confidence. She leaned into the music, letting her fingers glide across the keys, filling the space with the melodies that had lived in her mind for so long. Each note seemed to echo her story, the struggles, the dreams, the countless hours of practice hidden away from the world. Her body relaxed as she played, the tension easing, replaced by a sense of connection with the instrument. She lost track of the audience for a moment, imagining only the music and herself, the piano responding to her every intention. The initial fear that had gripped her chest melted away, replaced by a quiet determination to do her best, to let the sound speak louder than words ever could. The guests, initially uncertain, began to react subtly. Some leaned forward, resting their elbows on the table, eyes fixed on her hands. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. There was a murmured appreciation, a soft smile here and there, a nod of recognition. It wasn't overwhelming applause yet, but it was enough to fuel her confidence, enough to push her to continue. She shifted into a slightly faster tempo, incorporating gentle flourishes she had practiced countless times. The melody became richer, the harmonies weaving together in a pattern that felt alive. She watched without looking directly at them as the guests' expressions softened. The walls of skepticism and pretense that she had feared seemed to melt away with every chord. She realized almost in disbelief that she was not just playing notes anymore. She was telling a story, her story, without uttering a single word. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Minutes passed like seconds, and she felt as though the room had transformed around her. The sounds of the restaurant faded into the background, leaving only the piano and the people who had chosen to listen. She felt a subtle energy from the audience, a resonance that told her they were connecting with something real, something personal. That energy, quiet but undeniable, pushed her to explore deeper, to pour more of herself into the music. She remembered the long nights in her apartment, fingers hovering over keys trying to capture the emotion she felt but could not always name. She remembered the moments of doubt, the fear of failure, and the solitude. And now, in this unexpected spotlight, all of it mattered. All of it contributed to the way her hands moved, the way her music flowed, the way she could finally feel seen, even if only through the resonance of the sound. The melody shifted once again, becoming softer, gentler, almost like a lullaby. She imagined the city outside, the distant sounds of traffic and life continuing, and translated that into music. The guests seemed to lean in, listening with a kind of reverence she had never experienced before. She could feel her heartbeat sync with the rhythm of the notes, a silent conversation between her and the piano, amplified by the attentive audience. As the final notes faded, there was a moment of stillness. The silence felt charged, as if the room itself was holding its breath. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the faces of the guests. Some looked amazed, some thoughtful, some moved in ways she couldn't yet interpret. Then, as if on cue, a wave of applause began to build, first hesitant, then stronger, until it filled the room. It was a sound she had never heard directed at her before, and it struck her deeply. The warmth, the recognition, the validation, it all hit her at once, and for a moment she couldn't move. The manager approached cautiously, his face breaking into a relieved smile. "That was incredible," he whispered, barely audible over the applause. She nodded, still catching her breath, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The event had taken an unexpected turn, transformed by a simple act of courage and a long-hidden talent. She had been forced into the spotlight, yes, but in that moment, she had also discovered something profound about herself, that her music had the power to touch others, even in the most unlikely of places. She returned to her seat quietly, the adrenaline slowly subsiding. The applause continued, mingled with murmurs of admiration and curiosity. People asked each other quietly who she was, expressing amazement that someone from such a humble background could produce something so moving. She listened, feeling a mix of pride and humility, realizing that this night would be remembered by the guests long after they left. And for her, it was a turning point, a moment that would linger in her memory as a symbol of courage, talent, and the unexpected ways life sometimes opens doors. The night after the performance, she found herself unable to sleep. Her mind replayed every note she had played, every reaction she had seen, and every moment of doubt she had felt before sitting at the piano. Even though she had been exhausted from the long day, her heart refused to rest. She kept thinking about the faces in the audience, the quiet amazement, and the small gestures that had shown their admiration. Something had shifted in that room, something she had not anticipated. By the next morning, she woke up with a strange mixture of nerves and excitement. The day felt different, as if the world outside her apartment had shifted subtly while she slept. She went through her morning routine mechanically, yet her thoughts were elsewhere, floating on the memory of the music she had shared. Every sound she heard, the distant hum of traffic, birds outside the window, the faint clatter of dishes from the street below, seemed to carry a rhythm she had never noticed before. When she arrived at the restaurant, she was greeted by the familiar bustle, but there was an unusual energy in the air. Her manager approached her with a wide smile, holding a small notebook in his hand. He said nothing at first, just handed it over with a look that was equal parts pride and disbelief. Inside, she saw notes from some of the guests from the night before, written in neat, careful handwriting. They had praised her performance, suggested that she consider performing more publicly, and even included contact details for a local music venue. She felt a rush of emotions, surprise, disbelief, and a hesitant excitement. It was one thing to feel good about her own music in private, but it was something else entirely to have others recognize it so sincerely. Her co-workers noticed the change too. They teased her lightly, asking if she had suddenly discovered a secret fame overnight. She laughed along, keeping her excitement in check. But inside she was processing the reality of what had happened. The quiet, private world she had created for herself with music was beginning to extend outward, touching other people in ways she had only dreamed of. Throughout the day, she found herself replaying the performance in her mind. She remembered the nervous first notes, the way the music had gradually built, and the moment the room had fallen silent, waiting for the next chord. She thought about the subtle smiles, the leaning forward of heads, the occasional closing of eyes, all signs that people were listening not just with their ears but with their hearts. She realized that her music had spoken to them, telling her story without words, and it had been understood. In the following days, the restaurant continued its usual rhythm, but for her the world had changed. She noticed small things differently, the way light fell on the keys of her own piano at home, the faint vibrations she felt when she pressed the keys, the way melodies formed naturally in her mind as she went about daily tasks. She began experimenting quietly, trying new combinations, exploring sounds she had been hesitant to touch before. The experience of performing for the guests had opened a door she hadn't known was there, showing her that her music could reach beyond her apartment walls. One afternoon, a local music teacher came to the restaurant, having heard of her performance from one of the guests. He was an older man with a gentle demeanor, and he asked if she would consider lessons to refine her technique and expand her repertoire. She was hesitant at first. Lessons had always felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet he explained that he offered flexible arrangements for talented individuals who needed guidance, but couldn't pay the full fee. After some thought, she agreed, realizing that this could be an opportunity to grow her skill in a way she had never considered. The lessons were challenging but invigorating. The teacher encouraged her to explore new styles, to experiment with dynamics and rhythm, to play pieces that pushed her beyond the comfort of what she already knew. Each session left her feeling both exhausted and exhilarated, as though she had traveled far distances in just an hour. She noticed her hands moving more confidently over the keys, her sense of timing and expression improving steadily. The music that had once been a private refuge was becoming something she could shape and share with increasing confidence. Word of her talent began to spread slowly but surely. A regular customer at the restaurant mentioned her performance to a friend who organized small music gatherings, and soon invitations arrived to play at private events, charity functions, and small local venues. Each invitation brought a flutter of nervousness but also a sense of possibility. She realized that the life she had imagined in fragments during quiet nights at her piano was beginning to take shape in reality. Yet, despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded. She continued to work her shifts at the restaurant, not out of necessity alone, but out of a sense of connection to her everyday world. The restaurant had become a part of her life, a place where she honed her patience, empathy, and ability to respond to the unexpected. Even as she stepped into the growing opportunities offered by music, she kept a balance, letting the stability of her daily routine coexist with the excitement of newfound prospects. During these weeks, she also began to notice a change in how she perceived herself. She felt more confident, more willing to take risks, and more aware of her own capabilities. Music had always been a part of her identity, but now it was also a bridge between who she was privately and how she could exist in the world publicly. She realized that her own belief in herself was as important as the skills she had developed over years of practice. The courage to step forward when asked, to perform despite fear, had unlocked a door she hadn't dared open before. At home, she spent hours experimenting with new compositions, blending the classical pieces she had always loved with the spontaneous melodies that came to her in quiet moments. She wrote down ideas in her notebook, sometimes humming softly as she worked, losing herself in the creative process. Music became both a discipline and a joy, a way to explore who she was and what she could express. Each note she played carried intention, each pause became meaningful, and she began to feel a deeper connection to the emotions that had driven her to music in the first place. The support she received from her teacher and the small network of people who had witnessed her talent reinforced her sense of purpose. She began to consider performing more regularly, not just at private gatherings, but in spaces where her music could touch a wider audience. The idea was both exciting and daunting, but the memory of her first unexpected performance gave her courage. She knew that the risk of stepping into the spotlight was always present. Yet she also understood that the reward, the chance to share her music with others, was worth it. Through all of this, she remained humble and focused. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It required dedication, practice, and a willingness to face fear. She continued to show up at the restaurant each day, balancing her responsibilities there with her growing musical journey. The two worlds, seemingly separate, began to complement each other. The discipline, patience, and awareness she cultivated in the restaurant informed her musical practice, while the confidence and creativity she gained from music enriched her daily interactions with customers and co-workers. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling practice session, she paused to reflect on how far she had come. From the quiet hours in a small apartment to the moment she had been thrust into an unexpected performance, and now to the opportunities unfolding before her, it felt like a journey, both incredible and improbable. She realized that each step, no matter how small or uncertain, had contributed to this growing sense of purpose and self-belief. The fear and hesitation she had felt before performing were no longer paralyzing. Instead, they had become part of the story of her courage and growth. She understood that the journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and unexpected hurdles. Yet she also knew that she had the strength, talent, and resilience to navigate them. The music that had once been a private sanctuary was now a bridge to a life that felt fuller and more alive. It connected her to others, to opportunities, and to a deeper understanding of herself. As she prepared for the next day at the restaurant, she packed her bag with her notebook, her practice sheet, and a small water bottle. She felt a quiet excitement for what was to come, a sense that life was opening in ways she had not anticipated. The restaurant remained her anchor, the piano her voice, and her growing confidence the key to navigating both worlds. She was no longer just a waitress with a hidden talent. She was a musician stepping into the possibilities she had always imagined, one note at a time. It had been several weeks since that unexpected night at the restaurant, and her life had begun to shift in subtle yet significant ways. Each day brought a mix of excitement and responsibility. While she still worked her regular shifts at the restaurant, there was a new layer to her existence now, a sense of anticipation that had been missing for so long. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that had started to emerge naturally, and even small tasks seemed infused with a deeper sense of purpose. The invitations to perform were growing, though still small and manageable. A local community center wanted her to play at a charity event, and a small cafe asked if she could perform during a weekend brunch. Each opportunity made her heart race with a mix of nerves and excitement. She was careful to plan and practice, not wanting to let anyone down, especially after the first performance had gone so well. The thought of being on stage again was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. During her practice sessions at home, she began experimenting more boldly. She tried blending different styles, incorporating elements she had only ever admired from recordings. Sometimes she improvised entirely, letting her hands wander across the keys as her mind followed its own path. The small apartment filled with music, her imagination running wild as she explored possibilities she had never dared to before. These moments of creation were pure joy, and she often lost track of time, feeling the music as though it were part of her very being. Her teacher noticed the changes immediately. Each lesson became more intense and engaging, as he challenged her to refine her technique and develop her own voice. He encouraged her to perform not just pieces she had practiced, but her own original compositions. At first she was hesitant, unsure if her work was worthy of anyone else's ears. But he reassured her, saying that the authenticity in her music would resonate far more than technical perfection ever could. Slowly she started to embrace this advice, letting her emotions and experiences shape her playing more openly. The restaurant continued to be her anchor. During shifts, she moved through the space with a calm focus, aware of the rhythm of work, the pace of the kitchen, and the energy of the guests. She found that the discipline required for her job had helped her in music as well, standing for long hours, carrying trays, navigating crowded spaces. These experiences had built endurance and composure, which translated into her ability to perform under pressure. She began to see the connection between these two parts of her life, understanding that they complemented each other in unexpected ways. One evening, the community center event arrived. She carried her sheet music carefully, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves. The room was modest but inviting, with chairs arranged in rows and soft lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. As she walked to the piano, she could feel the audience's anticipation. Some were familiar with her story from the first performance. Others were meeting her for the first time. She took a deep breath, placing her hands on the keys and let the music take over. From the first note, she felt a sense of flow, the way music had always felt when she played alone. But now there was an added dimension, the awareness of an audience, of people listening and feeling alongside her. The music became a conversation, her emotions expressed in sound, and the room responded. People leaned forward, closed their eyes, smiled, and even shed a quiet tear. It was an incredible experience, unlike anything she had felt in her apartment, and it reinforced the truth she had begun to understand. Music had the power to connect and move people. After the performance, she received warm compliments and words of encouragement. Several attendees asked if she would perform again, and a few even offered suggestions for other venues. She left the event that night with a renewed sense of purpose, feeling that she was stepping into a life that had previously seemed only a distant dream. The small victories, the moments of connection, were becoming milestones in her journey. At home, she reflected on how far she had come in a relatively short time. The quiet confidence she carried into each performance was not something she had expected to find so quickly. She thought about the initial fear and hesitation, the trembling hands at the piano, and the silent prayers for success. Now she could approach each opportunity with composure, drawing strength from the knowledge that she had the skill and the heart to share her music effectively. The balance between work and music was delicate, but manageable. She kept her shifts at the restaurant, finding comfort in the routine and the people she interacted with daily. Customers and co-workers noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the calm assurance in her movements, and sometimes commented on how refreshed and happy she seemed. It was an unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted in her life, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. They simply saw her as someone growing into herself, someone radiating a quiet confidence and joy. Her music teacher continued to push her boundaries. He encouraged her to experiment with larger compositions and more challenging pieces. Sometimes he would ask her to play without sheet music, relying purely on memory and intuition. Each challenge stretched her abilities, forcing her to confront moments of uncertainty and transform them into creative opportunities. She began to trust herself more, understanding that mistakes were part of the process and often led to unexpected beauty in her music. The cafe performance arrived one sunny weekend. It was different from the community center event. The space was bustling, with customers chatting, the scent of coffee and pastries in the air, and sunlight streaming through large windows. She was nervous about competing with the ambient noise, worried that people might not pay full attention. But as she sat at the piano, she remembered her past performances and allowed herself to focus solely on the music. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, navigating each piece with a sense of control she had earned through practice and experience. People stopped their conversations when she began to play. The sounds of the cafe faded into the background, and her music created a calm, almost magical atmosphere. The audience responded instinctively, swaying gently, closing their eyes or leaning forward to listen more intently. It was an intimate connection, different from the larger event but equally powerful. She felt gratitude for the opportunity, knowing that each performance was a chance to share her passion and connect with others in a meaningful way. After the set, a small group approached her, expressing how much the music had touched them. Some shared personal stories of how certain melodies reminded them of moments in their own lives, while others simply thanked her for bringing beauty into their day. She listened with a humble smile, understanding that her music had become a gift not just for herself but for others as well. These moments strengthened her resolve to continue pursuing this path, despite the uncertainties that might come with it. Back at home, she spent time reflecting on her journey. She wrote in her notebook, not just compositions but also thoughts and feelings about her experiences. The writing helped her process the emotions stirred by performing, providing clarity and insight into her own growth. She realized that her life had transformed from a series of routines and survival into a journey of expression and connection. The music had become more than a hobby. It was a bridge to the world, a medium through which she could communicate her deepest emotions and touch the hearts of others. As she continued practicing and performing, she noticed a change within herself. She became more open to new experiences, more willing to step outside her comfort zone. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating or impossible now appeared as challenges to embrace. Her confidence grew steadily, and with it a sense of purpose that extended beyond music. She began to see herself as someone capable of shaping her own destiny, someone who could take the skills and passion she had nurtured in private and share them with the world in meaningful ways. In the weeks that followed, she found a rhythm between her work at the restaurant, her practice sessions, and the growing number of performances. Each part of her life informed the other, creating a sense of balance and fulfillment she had never experienced before. The restaurant remained a grounding force, a place where she could connect with everyday life and maintain her humility, while music became a path for growth, expression, and recognition. She understood that the journey was ongoing. There would be obstacles, moments of doubt, and days when things might feel overwhelming. But she also knew that she had developed the resilience, skill, and confidence to navigate these challenges. Each performance, each practice session, and each interaction contributed to her evolution, shaping her into someone capable of embracing both the ordinary and the extraordinary aspects of life. The music had opened doors, yes, but it had also revealed the strength and determination within herself that she had always carried, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Months passed, and her life continued to evolve in ways she had never imagined. The small private performances had now become more frequent, and she was starting to gain recognition within the local music community. People began to look forward to her presence, to the way her fingers danced across the piano keys, bringing emotion and depth to every note. She still worked at the restaurant, but the world she had once seen as separate from her musical aspirations was beginning to merge in surprising ways. Each performance brought new experiences and new challenges. Some audiences were attentive and quietly appreciative, while others were chatty and skeptical, making it difficult to capture their attention. She learned quickly how to read a room, to feel the mood of the audience, and to adjust her playing to reach them where they were. This ability became an essential skill, and she found herself enjoying the dynamic nature of live performances more than she had expected. The connection between musician and listener was something that no practice alone could replicate. She also began to experiment with collaborative performances, joining small ensembles with other musicians she met through her growing network. These experiences were enlightening, showing her how her music could blend and interact with other sounds, how improvisation could create spontaneous moments of beauty. The thrill of making music together, responding to each other in real time, gave her a new sense of excitement and creativity. She began to see music not just as a personal journey, but as a shared experience that could bring people together in ways she had never imagined. The recognition she was receiving also brought unexpected pressures. Invitations to perform at larger events were exciting but also intimidating. She worried about meeting expectations, about delivering something memorable, and about maintaining the authenticity of her music. At times, the nerves felt overwhelming, and she found herself practicing longer and more intensely than ever. Yet each time she performed, she discovered that the fear was temporary, and the joy and fulfillment that followed were far greater than the anxiety that preceded them. Her teacher continued to play an important role in her development. He challenged her to explore new techniques, to play with emotional intensity, and to trust her own instincts. He reminded her that mistakes were part of the learning process and that vulnerability in performance could create moments of genuine connection. She took this advice to heart, embracing imperfections as opportunities for growth rather than threats to her credibility. This mindset allowed her to experiment more freely, leading to performances that were both technically impressive and deeply moving. Life outside of music continued to provide grounding. The restaurant, with its routines and responsibilities, offered stability and perspective. She enjoyed interacting with customers, observing the flow of daily life, and finding inspiration in ordinary moments. Sometimes she would notice a customer humming a tune, laughing at a shared joke, or quietly enjoying a meal, and she would realize that these small experiences were connected to her music. Her observations of human behavior, emotion, and interaction enriched her compositions and performances, adding depth and relatability. One evening, she was invited to perform at a local cultural festival. It was an outdoor event, with a large, diverse crowd gathered in the park. The energy was palpable, with people chatting, children playing, and the smell of food from nearby stalls filling the air. As she approached the piano, set up on a small stage, her nerves flared momentarily. But as soon as her fingers touched the keys, the music took over, and she felt a familiar sense of flow. The melodies rose and fell, filling the open space, reaching the ears and hearts of everyone present. The audience's response was overwhelming. People stopped what they were doing to listen, some swaying with the rhythm, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the sound. A few approached after her set, expressing admiration and offering opportunities for future collaborations. The experience reinforced her understanding that music could transcend barriers, connect strangers, and evoke emotions that words often could not capture. It was a validation of the time, effort, and heart she had poured into her craft. As she navigated these opportunities, she also became aware of her own growth. The shy, uncertain musician who had once hesitated to play in front of strangers had transformed into someone capable of commanding attention with authenticity and confidence. She learned to embrace both the vulnerability and the power that came with sharing her music. Each performance, whether large or small, contributed to her understanding of herself, her abilities, and the impact her art could have on others. Along the way, she faced moments of doubt and fatigue. Balancing work at the restaurant, practicing, and performing could be exhausting. There were days when she questioned whether she could continue, whether she was truly meant for this path. During those moments, she returned to the piano, allowing music to remind her of why she had started, of the joy it brought, and of the people she had touched through her performances. These reminders renewed her commitment and strengthened her resolve. She also began to notice a change in how she was perceived by others. Friends, co-workers, and acquaintances commented on her confidence, composure, and the quiet glow of satisfaction she carried. They were curious about her journey, often asking how she had discovered and nurtured her talent. She responded with humility, sharing bits of her story without revealing every detail. Her journey had become not just about music, but about courage, resilience, and the pursuit of passion despite obstacles. In her personal time, she continued to develop her skills and explore new musical ideas. She experimented with compositions that blended styles, drew inspiration from personal experiences, and incorporated elements from the performances she had attended as an audience member. Each new piece she created was a reflection of her growth, a testament to the journey she had undertaken, and a gift she could share with those who listened. As the months progressed, she began to receive recognition beyond her local community. Social media posts and word-of-mouth referrals introduced her to a wider audience. People from nearby cities, even from other countries, discovered her music, expressing admiration and interest. While she remained grounded and focused on her development, she understood that her reach was expanding, and with it, the responsibility to maintain the authenticity and emotional depth that had become her signature. She continued to balance her life with care. The restaurant remained a part of her daily routine, offering stability and connection to the everyday world. Her music became a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary, linking her past, present, and future. She cherished the moments of quiet practice in her apartment, the exhilaration of live performances, and the relationships she was building through her art. Throughout it all, she maintained a deep sense of gratitude. She thought often of the unexpected night that had changed everything, when she had been asked to perform without warning. That moment had been the catalyst for her transformation, and she never forgot the courage it took to step forward despite fear. She understood that opportunities often appeared in unpredictable ways, and that embracing them required both trust and action. Her journey was no longer just about personal achievement. It had become about connection, impact, and the ability to inspire others through her music. Each note she played carried meaning. Each performance created shared experiences, and each audience member became part of a larger story she was helping to write. She realized that the life she had once imagined in quiet solitude was now unfolding in tangible ways, and she felt both awe and responsibility for the path she was on. As she prepared for another performance, she reflected on how much she had grown. She was no longer just a waitress with a hidden talent. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a source of inspiration. Her journey had been shaped by courage, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to her passion. And while there were still challenges ahead, she knew that each performance, each practice session, and each new opportunity would continue to shape her, guiding her toward a future filled with music, purpose, and connection. The morning of her next big performance arrived with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She woke early as usual, her mind already running through the music she would play. Each note, each chord, each pause felt significant, carrying the weight of months of practice, growth, and countless performances. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that felt comfortable yet presentable, knowing that first impressions mattered even when the music was the real message. As she walked to the venue, she felt a familiar flutter in her stomach. It was a sensation she had come to recognize, a blend of fear and anticipation that had become part of the journey. Yet unlike before, it no longer paralyzed her. She had learned to channel the nerves into focus, letting the energy of her emotions fuel her performance rather than hinder it. Each step toward the venue felt like a reaffirmation of the courage she had cultivated over the past months. The venue was a small theater in the heart of the city, intimate yet formal, with rows of seats arranged in gentle curves around the stage. The audience was varied. Some were familiar faces from past performances, others were new attendees curious to witness her talent firsthand. The lights dimmed as she approached the piano, and the hush that fell over the crowd was almost tangible. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the weight and history of the instrument beneath her touch. She began with a piece she had composed herself, one that carried the emotions of her journey. The struggles, the victories, the moments of doubt and triumph. The melody flowed naturally, each note resonating with clarity and intention. She felt herself connecting not just with the piano but with the audience, sensing their engagement and response. Every subtle shift in posture, every expression became part of the music, feeding back into her performance. As she played, she noticed a collective stillness in the room. Conversations faded, movement slowed, and the audience leaned in, fully present. The music became a shared experience, a bridge between her world and theirs. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, realizing that her talent was not just a personal joy but a gift that could touch and move others. This understanding gave her confidence and focus, allowing her to explore the depths of her compositions without fear. The performance continued, building in intensity and complexity. She transitioned between pieces with careful thought, each selection chosen to tell a different part of her story. Some pieces were joyful and lively, reflecting moments of triumph and hope, while others were soft and introspective, capturing the struggles and doubts she had faced. The audience responded intuitively, leaning forward during crescendos, closing their eyes during quiet passages, and reacting in ways that showed they were emotionally invested. She took a brief pause between pieces, using the moment to breathe and center herself. The applause was warm and appreciative, yet restrained, as if the audience understood that the journey of music was ongoing, and this was just a chapter in a larger story. She smiled quietly, acknowledging their response without breaking the focus she had cultivated. Each interaction, each note, reinforced the connection between performer and listener, a connection she had come to cherish deeply. During the second half of the performance, she incorporated improvisation, allowing her emotions to guide her hands and create music in real time. This was a new level of challenge, one that required trust in her instincts and confidence in her abilities. She felt the audience responding, leaning into the spontaneity, experiencing the raw and authentic expression she was offering. It was exhilarating, a culmination of the skills, courage, and intuition she had developed over months of growth. After the final piece, the theater was silent for a moment, as if the audience collectively held its breath. Then slowly, applause began to build, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. She rose from the piano bench, bowing slightly, feeling the warmth and validation of their response. The sound of clapping, cheering, and even a few standing ovations filled the room, a tangible acknowledgement of the journey she had undertaken and the talent she had nurtured. Backstage, she allowed herself a quiet moment to absorb the experience. The rush of adrenaline, the satisfaction of accomplishment, and the awareness of her growth all mingled into a profound sense of fulfillment. She thought about the path that had led her here, the small apartment with a worn piano, the nervous first performance at the restaurant, the lessons, the practice sessions, and every performance that had taught her something new. Each step had been essential, and each challenge had strengthened her. The recognition she had received extended beyond this single performance. Attendees spoke of her music with enthusiasm, sharing their experiences with friends, family, and colleagues. Invitations to perform at larger venues, festivals, and collaborative events began to arrive. She remained grounded, approaching each opportunity with the same dedication, humility, and focus that had carried her thus far. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It required discipline, perseverance, and a genuine connection with the audience. She continued to work at the restaurant, appreciating the balance it provided. The rhythm and structure of her daily tasks grounded her, offering a contrast to the emotional intensity of her musical life. She enjoyed interacting with customers, observing the small joys and challenges of everyday life, and drawing inspiration from the human experiences she witnessed. These observations enriched her compositions, adding authenticity and relatability to her music. At home, she dedicated time to personal growth and exploration. She experimented with new compositions, incorporating lessons learned from performances and interactions with other musicians. Improvisation became a regular practice, allowing her to develop spontaneity and confidence in her creative expression. She also reflected on her journey, recording her thoughts, experiences, and emotions in a notebook. This practice provided clarity, perspective, and a deeper understanding of her own growth and potential. Her relationship with her teacher remained strong and supportive. He continued to challenge her, pushing her to explore new techniques, expand her repertoire, and deepen her emotional expression. Their sessions were dynamic, often blending technical instruction with philosophical discussions about music, creativity, and the power of art to connect and transform. She valued his guidance, recognizing that his mentorship had been instrumental in her development. Through these experiences, she also became more aware of her impact on others. Audience members expressed how her music had touched them, evoked memories, or inspired reflection. Friends and coworkers noticed the confidence, poise, and joy she carried, and they often expressed admiration for her dedication and talent. These responses reinforced her understanding that her journey was not just personal, but also communal, that her music had the power to inspire, comfort, and connect. As she looked ahead, she envisioned a future filled with continued growth, exploration, and connection. She imagined performing in larger venues, collaborating with diverse musicians, and sharing her music with a broader audience. Yet she remained committed to the core principles that had guided her journey: dedication to her craft, humility, and authenticity. She understood that these qualities were essential to sustaining her success and maintaining the integrity of her artistic expression. The journey had taught her valuable lessons about courage, resilience, and self-belief. She had learned that opportunities often arise unexpectedly, and embracing them requires trust in oneself and the willingness to step into uncertainty. She had discovered that talent alone was not enough. It needed to be nurtured through practice, patience, and perseverance. She had also learned that the connection between artist and audience was sacred, and that sharing one's art with authenticity could create profound experiences for both performer and listener. As she prepared for her next steps, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to share her music, for the mentors and supporters who had guided her, and for the audiences who had embraced her with warmth and appreciation. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that each performance, each practice session, and each new opportunity was part of a larger story she was still writing. In this moment, she realized that she was no longer just the waitress who had been asked to perform unexpectedly. She was a musician, a storyteller, and an artist with the courage to share her gift with the world. Her journey had transformed her life, opening doors she had never imagined and allowing her to connect with others in ways that transcended words. And as she sat at her piano, fingers poised over the keys, she felt a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment, ready to continue her journey, one note at a time.